And while you're lying, what I actually started to tell you about was what this week will hold. This week will be a continuation of you exploring how you get around on the floor a bit, but with this idea of coming up. We say against gravity. I mean, we're always kind of against and with gravity. Our whole, our whole development is based on establishing this push-pull relationship with gravity. So remember last Friday, we finished the week where you were sat up, basically. So if you think about it from a baby's point of view, that's sitting up, and what that position affords you. So this idea of affording, what does this position offer you? Once you can balance in sitting and you're not leaning on your hands and your hands are free, and what you experienced was that your eyes were free. So your eyes can turn around. Remember in that sitting and twisting to the left lesson, which we've decided dead bird lesson is just a horrible name. So we've decided to call it the twisting bird lesson, Jen. We're going to just change tradition because that's what we can do. Twisting bird. You're free to rotate around yourself, which means that instead of seeing life from the floor, which you're doing now, you can turn around yourself, and that turning around yourself might be, might have been 90 degrees when you started. You might have had a 90-degree span. It might be 180 degrees. And maybe that span can get even bigger. So your world gets bigger, right? Just from a sitting position. So we're going to continue on with that. So lessons in sitting. Continuing to integrate the use of the eyes. So do the eyes integrate the movement, or does the movement integrate the eyes? You be the judge. They are interdependent, aren't they? And in fact, that's developmentally how it happens, is that this feed-forward system between the eyes in particular and the muscles in particular of the trunk and the neck map to each other. So the old theories were that it was all about, uncovering tonic writing reflexes and blah-de-blah-de-blah. Now with dynamic action theories, it's more around systems mapping against each other or supporting each other so that the world makes more sense. And you'll be experiencing that directly this week with your eyes orienting to the horizon, because orienting to the horizon is the easiest orientation for the brain to process information. And we touched on that a bit last week. So we're still continuing with this sort of focus on the head and vision, and how this interrelatedness between the senses and movement is such a rich set of connections. So still with that idea of this, particularly focusing on sensing, the four things: sensing, thinking, feeling, and doing. We're still with this a slightly brighter torch shining on sensing. Of course, the thinking and the feeling and the doing, we can't take out of the picture, but we're foregrounding the sensing up to a point. The overall thing still is this idea of immersing yourself in ATM, with this idea of getting to know yourself and then emerging quietly out of that rich soup that is you, and having a little experience of other people's soup, sharing in small groups and then in the bigger group, so that your experience is contextualized by other people's experience. And of course, we encourage you to go home and practice discussing your experience with people who aren't in the room. We'll continue with some of the pragmatic stuff. We'll bring Moshe into the room in various ways this week, so that you can start to get used to his voice. It's a challenge, and it's always a challenge for us to pick something that won't sidetrack you. So we're thinking, a couple of different ways of how that might happen. What else? Da-da-da-da. Yeah, I think that's about it. Jenny and I are the staff in the room now, and this is the usual ratio. So there are the guild, or the training accreditation part of the guild, has good, clear guidelines about staff to student ratio, which Jenny's always been generous with. So there's 2 of us. Last week was a luxury having 3 of us. And Jenny does have to divide herself a little bit. CS1 is still downstairs. They're in their final week for this segment, where Zoran is. But that's marvellous to have Jenny in the room as the assistant trainer. So you'll hear her voice more this week. And then, as we said, Zoran will be back in the room next week as trainer, and I will disappear back into the black hole previously known as university life. Okay, so that's the orientation to the week. Let's shrink the sphere of orientation now back down to you and the environment of your mat. And how easy is it to come from an external focus into an internal focus? And so for some people, this is as natural as breathing, is to turn inward. If this is where you're most comfortable, you know, kind of sourcing your data from, as it were, is looking inward, then this is such a natural thing, and others it's not. Like to process things in this way, to look for information internally, is not necessarily your default. I remember when I, had a baby, it was very clear to me where my default mechanism for information was. As soon as Eddie did anything, I would go to a book, like an external thing. Failing the books, then my mother. Don't tell her that she was second on the list. So it's not my natural, not my first intention to go internal. Feldenkrais has been a gift to me because I've learned how to do it. It might not be my first port of call. I might need a reminder to do it. So just be aware of that for you. And what are you actually looking for? Do you look for sensations? How am I lying on the floor? How does the floor feel? Are you going internal and examining your thoughts? So the thinking side of things, your thinking stuff. Are you more intrigued by the feeling stuff? So the emotional content of your current state of being. Or there's not a lot of doing to pay attention to. The doing might be the breathing, or you might be looking around, or you might be intrigued by the lying. So somehow or other in those 4 things, you will have a preference as well. And in this room, it's not like we're going to change, as in completely rewire you. What we're after is broadening your set of preferences. Not even necessarily reordering them, but broadening them and giving you the opportunity to strengthen some of them that perhaps don't come so naturally to you. Last night I was reading a talk that Feldenkrais gave on this, and it's not one that I'll probably choose to share with you because there's a lot of other stuff in it. But when this is not change as in you're going to be a different person after Feldenkrais. It's about looking at your patterns and developing new ones, maybe even using some of the old patterns in a more sophisticated way. So it's not like saying, I have to change because actually I'm bad now, so I need to change. It's about how can I develop. The change as a development, as a broadening, and in some cases refining process. Okay. So you've scanned yourself in whatever way is your sort of default. And find a way to roll up to sitting. And sit with your right foot behind you. So you're side sitting to the left. Now most of you are in different positions, so you might not remember your spot from last Friday, like your turning spot, you know, that shifting point on the wall or in front of you. Maybe you do. Anyway, put your left hand behind you where you can find that point where you're taking a little bit of weight and it's not too much and it's not too little, so it's sustainable. And have your right arm up in front of your eyes and your hand is dangling. Why is your hand is dangling? Just to show that there's not a lot of effort, and it's not like you're punching through the air or dragging through the air. That's just a sort of a tacit thing that essentially I want my arm to be as effortless as possible in holding up, and that your eyes can gaze across the top of the hand to some kind of horizon. And that you could do that, you could look a little bit down and focus on your hand, which is close, and then with very, very little adjustment, raise your eyes and gaze out and get that sense of far away. And now slowly turn to the left, paying attention to the quality, and where you get to the point where you say, okay, quality control, I'm not prepared to push any further. You know, this is becoming a bit of a push. I love my system and I'm not going to demand that it works hard. I want it to feel lovely. I will stop where I'm starting to get the feeling that it no longer feels lovely. Easy, where all my breathing is held or something in me clenches, something. It was one of these things that we keep returning, these signs, these signposts, and where that point is. And now come back to the front and close your eyes. So if you did this with your eyes closed before, now you do it with your eyes open. The point is, you do it both ways, eyes open and eyes closed, and see if it's the same point. And what is still kind of present in your system that you learned, either implicitly or explicitly? That means either obviously, you know, consciously or subconsciously, and very loosely, from last Friday. Are you completely back to square one from what you remember? Or some of the things that became a little bit more lively, are they still a little bit more lively? Some of the things that woke up in your system to help you carry yourself around to the left. Now, leave that, having satisfied yourself that there are some things have carried over from last Friday, and maybe some things need to be reviewed, and bring your right hand around so that it can also rest on the floor to the left of you. And find a way that you can take weight, so both hands are to the left of you, leaning on the floor. Find a way that you could, you could adjust yourself so that if I put scales under each hand, both hands are taking roughly the same kind of weight. So they're not too far away from you and they're not too close. You're not deeply committed to your hands. So if someone came and did that horrible thing where they kicked your elbows, you wouldn't fall over particularly, so there's some kind of equipoise between weight bearing on your leg, both legs, and your arms. You're sort of distributed. That's it. So it's sustainable, again, that your wrists aren't taking so much weight that they're going to start hurting. And in this position, find a way that you could lower your head. So this is a movement familiar from last week. You can see why there's such a beautiful series of lessons and why we do them in this kind of block. And when you're lowering, is there a way, now do you also remember last week you discovered that you had a middle? This is a lesson that I taught. So as you're rolling back, your middle went backwards. The middle of your back went backwards. So it's not just about lowering your head, but the whole of you supports that. Yeah, okay. So look as if you're going to look at your belly button. So so there's going to be a rounding of your back. And your head's not necessarily going in the direction of the floor. It's going to look at your belly button. That's it. So your back is rounding. Not there may be a slight twist, but the twist isn't the big deal. And there's a shift in weight. What's happening in your right hip? If you really wanted to look your belly button, they can really increase the movement in your neck. And I should say, it's not an and or, it's not an or, it's an and. If the small of your back goes backwards, so your belly actually moves away from your thigh. How could that work? So now you might need to readjust your hands. So if your hands are too far away from you, your back can't go backwards. So as you're looking down, that's it. Your belly goes away from your thigh. What happens to the right sit bone? It may go more towards the floor. So then you start to feel, is it that I'm lowering my head, or is something in my hip joints or my pelvis moving so that I could get clearer about, I could see my belly more? And can I sense the shape of my spine as my pelvis is free to roll backwards? So this is a flexion movement, right? It's a flexion in the trunk, just to state the bleeding obvious. And then as you come up, what's the feeling like? So it's kind of like your pelvis pushes the top of your head towards the ceiling. So if the movement's all in your neck, this doesn't kind of make sense because you're just flapping your head forwards and backwards. Could you find a way now where the intention is not so much your head moving itself, but your pelvis allowing your head to lower, and then your pelvis supporting your head? And now next time you do it, open your eyes, and what's the feeling like, the sensing and the feeling of opening your eyes as you're looking up? Like, I want to see, and my pelvis is helping me see. So there's this connection between the movement of the pelvis and I want to see up. And a connection of the pelvis and the eyes, I want to see down. And I want to orient up and I want to orient down. I want to look in and I want to look out. Gorgeous. Leave it and rest on your back. This is an incredibly sophisticated movement, right? It's and it emerges. So my job is to give you just enough signposts for you to find it for yourself. And what's the influence of this turning to the left, this orienting up and down to the left? What influence has that had on the way you experience yourself on the floor? So again, if we think about those broad domains of experiencing the self, sensing, thinking, feeling, doing, did you access the same ones in the same kind of order? Were you just simply relieved to not be doing anymore? You just so relieved at not leaning on your wrists that was the overwhelming experience as you lay down? Or you feel like you can catch your breath because you were holding your breath? Or what is it? What comes to the foreground spontaneously? And then you can systematically then check in, actually, okay, that's fine. I've heard what you want to tell me, body, system. Now, I just need to check around and compare, say, left and right. The length of my left arm and the length of my right arm. Length of left leg, right leg. Length of my spine. If I was going to turn my head, would it be more to the left or more to the right? That kind of stuff. Roll over and come up to sitting, same position. And once or twice, I'll just call it the reference movement, which is finding the spot. So leaning only on your left hand with your right hand dangling. And this is just for interest. And in a way, you're seeing what ingredients from each of these little iterations that we're doing, some of them will have an impact and some of them won't. And you're just curious about which will and which won't. So see if anything's changed or if it's the same in terms of where your spot is. And what is the spot? This is kind of how available your world is to the left. How easily do you access the left world? This is not a political statement. I could actually surreptitiously be guiding you to all orient to the left. Julie's happy. Other people want to storm out. Don't worry, I'll make a religious joke too sometimes. I can be offensive in many domains. Okay, leave that. Have you both? I can be equally offensive in many domains. That's my adaptability. Have both hands on the floor to the left. So this idea that both of them can be used to support you. And that in itself will change your weight bearing. It has to, right? Your base is different. And now keeping your hands there, turn your shoulders as comfortably as they can to the right. Clumsy wording. And your head can go with. Your hands stay there and then keep doing that. So bring your shoulders back to this orientation over your hands and then your shoulders to the right. There you go. We've quickly changed political, but you're not going all the way to the right. You're just dabbling. You're just seeing what Malcolm Turnbull's up to. You're not going to follow him, but you're just checking him out. And what is happening now, so again, it's the same kind of exploration, is that you were attending to something quite focal, whatever that was. Maybe it was your eyes, maybe it was your neck, maybe it was the right shoulder, but something was very foreground. So can you broaden your attention to be more inclusive and think about, maybe the other shoulder, think about both hands and keep broadening your attention all the way down your spine, what's happening in your pelvis, in particular what's happening to the two hip joints. So these sit bones that are still quite elusive, where do they go in relation to the floor? And not only on that outward journey, like taking your shoulders to the right, but where do they go when you come back to the left? And the floor can be a good reference. One goes more into the floor in one position, one goes away from the floor and is a bit slight, not necessarily vice versa. But how do you get the sense of your pelvis, these sit bones? There are two of them, and sometimes they kind of do the same thing and sometimes they do opposite. And the movement can be as small as you need because it's only the hint of what happens in the sit bones, that's it. And then there's this idea, that's it, that as you come back, you get kind of taller. Did you lose that? And the eyes become more erect. Well, the eyes, the system becomes more erect. Good, leave it. Rest in a different position. You don't have to lie down unless, if you lie, you're welcome to lie down. Just remember that you have to come back up again. It's your choice. And again, the rules of the game for ATM, if you need to rest, you don't have to wait for me to offer a rest. You can rest whenever. You can rest simply in your mind. You can rest by having a different posture. You can rest your eyes somewhere else. This is really you working out for yourself how much you need to eat before you just have to have a little rest and let the digestion happen. And if that means a mini rest, it's okay. If you really had enough and you just want to curl up into a ball and listen for the rest of the ATM, these are decision points, right? And they come about by checking in. And the classic metaphor that Feldenkrais used to use was eating. And if you were brought up like me and like a lot of us, I wasn't allowed to leave the table until I'd finished my plate. So if I said I've had enough, that's, I'd only eaten half of it. That's, and maybe that's appropriate for children because we're pretty naughty, and I was a pretty recalcitrant little kid. But as an adult, we don't have to do that, right? Those external limits aren't necessarily there. And sometimes if you go and see your grandma and, if you don't clean the plate, she'll be really upset. You might force yourself to do it because that's a different thing, right? Different compulsion there. But in this forum here, it's about when have I eaten enough for me at this point. You don't have to finish your plate, is what I'm telling you. Especially if you don't want to eat the carrots. That'd be a good decision. They're a waste of space. Come back up to sitting. Same position, so your feet are swept to the right. You're leaning on both hands to the left. And this time, as you take your shoulders to the right, can your eyes stay to the left? And then they come back. Now you may want to keep your eyes closed or open. Try both. What's easier? Shoulders and head go to the right as before, and your eyes stay to the left. So it's the same movement. It's just that you're taking your eyes out of the picture. So if that's hard to start with, do the same movement. So everything goes to the right and back to the left. Everything goes to the right and back to the left. Now make the movement smaller and see if your eyes can quietly stay to the left. So they'll move to the left will move to the left corner and the right will go towards the nose. And there'll be that feeling. So you can see last week we spent a lot of time feeling where our eyes are so that you know. So it's just the head and shoulders together and the eyes are different. You could try both, yeah, because having them open and fixed on a position could be a strategy. That will use slightly different wiring than if they just move to the left. See if you can feel the difference. One will be harder. The strategy often is easier for people because we are so used to orienting to a visual target. And see if you can do it without the visual target. So it's purely movement and sensation, not vision. Sensation is in somatic, not visual. And the other strategies you might use to make it smaller and slower so that the components can be attended to more easily. Leave it. Just rest off your hands for a moment. I remember earlier I said about, when you first lay down, is it easy for you to access internal data, information, Or do you orient external, like me, books and whatever? It's the same thing with this internal authority. So this internal decision making versus the external. Do you wait for me to say have a rest, or do you choose your own rest time, or can you do both with equal facility? And again, there's no right or wrong here. What we're after is that you can do both, and that you know when you can make sort of reasoned decisions around when it's better to do one, like when you're going to upset your grandma, so you do clean the plate, even though you're going to feel full. Versus, no, today it doesn't matter. I can listen to my internal authority. Okay, so come back and test your spot. So that's with only your left hand leaning and your right hand up in the bird position, and see how the spot is going, like literally see how the spot is going and how what's the world like to the left? How big is your world to the left? With this idea that I only want to go where I feel good. That's my internal authority. I don't have an external idea of range of motion of what's, competitive and good. That's great. That's great. Yeah, and that's the approximations. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Could look eyes open, eyes closed. And can you attend to the whole of you? Is your attention inclusive or exclusive? And then have the both hands on the floor. And this time, your shoulders go to the right and back, and your head goes opposite. We'll just think about shoulders and head now. We'll forget the eyes for a minute, otherwise you'll seriously dislike me. So your head stays in a way going to the left and your shoulders to the right. Then your shoulders go to the left and your head goes to the right. So where do you put I say it again. Take your shoulders round to the right and your head goes to the left. So just start off, again, here's a strategy. Start off doing the thing that you know best, which is everything going to the right. And then take your head to the left as your shoulders stay to the right, so that you differentiate the two, and then you start moving them in opposition to each other, so that the shoulders go back to the left and the head's to the right. As the shoulders sweep to face more to the front, actually, the head looks over. And again, like Narayan had a strategy using his eyes, you could have a strategy of looking for the sensation. Now, I don't want to give you too many strategies because I want you to find your own. But maybe it's that you get this idea of, this kind of coquettish looking over your shoulder kind of idea. So that your chin and your shoulder come together, actually. There'll be some features, some senses, some feelings that you can put together so that you know this different position where your head and your shoulders are different to each other. And then you kind of tag them. And what's happening in your hip joint. So it could be that you might think about, Helen, that could you take your chin to the opposite, to the left shoulder, and then your chin to the right shoulder. Think about it like that, and then do. That's it. So could you bring your right shoulder towards your chin? And your chin goes towards your right shoulder as well. That's it. So you really like looking down on top of your shoulder, and then look down on the top of your left shoulder. That's it. That's it. And now just keep doing that little movement. That's essentially the movement. That's good. And your right shoulder and your chin want to come together. Beautiful. That's it. That's the movement in opposition. Leave it, rest on your back. Now, having said leave it and rest on your back, if you want to keep exploring, feel free. You know, like there is benign anarchy in the room. So just because I tell you to rest and you don't want to, and you've got a good reason because you're really curious about something, you're on a bit of a mission, if you can do it with elegance and comfort, feel free. You've still got a little question that's unanswered. Who am I to tell you to have a rest if you're not hurting yourself? Isn't it marvelous? Sanctioned anarchy. Does it make you want to just be really obedient because you're a true anarchist and whatever I tell you, you want to do the opposite? Jenny Evans is an anarchist. I'm just telling you. Just letting you know. She's very cheeky. She looks kind of upright. She's quite a naughty person. You like that, Jenny? And again, you might have been spontaneously doing it or not. What kind of grabs your attention as you lay down? The possibilities are endless. Maybe it was a relief feeling. If so, where? What's changed and what stayed the same? The sidedness. So we are somewhat relentlessly turning to the left. What influence does that have on your eyes? Does one eye feel bigger than the other? Does one nostril feel bigger than the other? Do you feel like you hear sounds more in one ear than the other? What about the fingers on the right hand versus the left hand? If you had to find your right hip joint or your left hip joint, roll up to sitting, same position. So feet swept to the right. Take a moment to check your spot. See how quickly we form habits? So instead of me describing that whole word, I've created a little habit pattern and I'll just say, check your spot. And all of those components immediately emerge because we've created a shorthand and that's a little habit. We've agreed on that little habit. That's very efficient. Right? Now, if somebody new walked in the room, it's completely useless because I don't know what check your spot is at all. But this is how culturally we develop a cultural kind of habit, particularly around language. Shorthand, if you like, it's efficient. When it's not a good habit is if I didn't get all the elements clear in the first instance. So every now and again, I want to check in, make sure that what we understand by checking your spot is about quality. It's about your feet being to the right. It's about your arm being supported upright, your hand dangling, your eyes can be open and your eyes can be closed, your breathing is uninterrupted. So we can unpack that habit every now and again to make sure that we're all agreeing on the same habit, right? And how is that world going? The world of the leftness. Yeah, you can. So Helen's question is, can you think of your left arm as an axis? And absolutely, it is. There's also an axis in your left hip joint that's not perhaps quite so obvious. You are turning around your left shoulder, the shoulder or the axis of your left arm, but the movement's actually in the wrist and the shoulder in particular. So if that helps. So for some people, if I start talking about axes, they get that little tightening feeling because it's theory. And other people, it really helps to have that idea of turning around something. We are so beautifully individual. And this idea of coming back and then the eyes really scanning and sweeping around the horizon. Beautiful. Good. And bring your both hands on the floor. If you did, well, what Feldenkrais is noticing in the class is that people are taking a lot of weight on their wrist and they'll come back up off their wrist and they'll shake it, and he's making a big lot of energy jokes about, oh yes, you're shaking out your discomfort and shaking out your pain, doing all this woo-woo stuff. I haven't noticed anybody shaking their hand. It's all right. He has such fantastic rants. You think I'm good at ranting, you got to hear him. Unbelievable. Okay, so both hands taking a little bit of weight, supporting you. So this changes your axis a little bit. Now take your shoulders to the right and your head goes opposite, so to the left more. And again, how do you break that down if that's all confusing? How do you go about systematically finding that there's a difference between the head and the shoulders? And notice as you do that, where do your eyes go? Do they go with the shoulders or do they go with the head? So make it quite conscious that the first couple of times your eyes go with your head. If your head's going to the right, more to the front of the room, your eyes are going with it. And as your head goes more in the direction of the back of the room, your eyes go with it. And your shoulders are doing the opposite. And without compromising your breathing, at some point, change your eyes over. So their allegiance is with the shoulders. So if your shoulders are facing more towards the side wall, more to the left, your eyes are more to the left, but your head is to the right. And your head is to the right. And it's not worth holding your breath for. You can purse your lips, you can hold your breath, you can have a tanty, I don't care. Will it help you? I don't know. But fries your head, go small and just quietly imagine and just do a bit of it. So here's your strategy for learning. Okay, here's how do I go about tackling something that makes me feel inadequate or confused or lost? So a strategy is to give up for a while. You can give up completely. That's not a good strategy if it's your tax return and you just have to do it at some point, right? She speaks from experience. Can I go smaller? Can I go back to something that I know, which is my head and my shoulders? Go back to something that's familiar and just sneak up. Or something that's familiar, like, can I find the difference between my eyes and my head? What are my strategies for tackling something that is difficult? Can I open my eyes? Do I close my eyes? Can I use my vision? That strategy of finding a point to look at. Does that help me? Or a sensation like the feeling of my chin coming to my shoulder. as opposed to my shoulder and my chin moving together as a piece. And you stay with what feels clear, and you sortie into the unclear. And of course, then you know what I'm going to say, broaden your attention. So that this is not at the compromise. If what the big discovery for today was your right hip joint moving towards the floor and back, go back to that. Go back to what you know. And if that's just taking your chin, not just, there's no just about it, taking your chin to one shoulder and the other, that's fine. And you'll get lost. How do you find your way again? Fascinating. You'd be fascinated. No, it's stupid. So there's this thing, isn't it? It's not just about the movement. The movement is the vehicle, if you like, to really explore in a safe and benign way, how do I deal with contrariness? Beautiful. Leave it, lie on your back. Have a well-deserved rest. And what's that? You could. Good. Awareness through movement, movement through awareness. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You could call them LTAs, life through awareness, or ATLs, awareness through life, or awareness through sensing, or maybe not. And this is where we drive you batty, because you'll ask a question and we'll go, maybe. Because actually what starts to happen in your thinking, like with your sensing, you start getting very flexible in your thinking with this work. And it can make you feel a bit shifty, because it's sort of hard to pin down, what do I really think? You start to be able to think two opposing thoughts. You know, your thinking can flex and extend. And that can be a little bit discombobulating if you're used to having a really fixed way of thinking. And then we come along and kind of tickle it all up. And again, what's the influence of this turning to the left in an asymmetrical position? Is it kind of equalizing you? Is it lateralizing you? Whatever those words mean. For the last time, for now, come up to that sitting and test your spot. So that's leaning only on the left hand, and the right hand is suspended comfortably in front of you. And maybe for some people, what they notice the biggest difference with this is that they're finding a way that their arm can be suspended in front of them easier. Like the benefit of this lesson could manifest in many different ways. And check again with eyes open and with eyes closed. Are they the same spot? Obviously, there's an order effect. So what you do second, is it likely to be easier? And that's learning. That's the practice effect, is learning. And is your attention inclusive? Are you thinking about your right big toe? Because it's involved. It's on the floor, for most people. What about your baby toe? I'm not saying it's got a major role, but was your attention that inclusive? From the top of your head down to your baby right toe, your right baby toe. Lovely. And leave that just for a moment. Pause just to collect yourself. Find a way to come up to standing. And stay within yourself for the moment. So you check in just on just yourself. So that might mean keeping your eyes shut or not. You can go inward without shutting your eyes. And what I was noticing lying on the floor, how are those things in standing? So the leftness or the rightness or the change in length or the bigness of one eye versus another. The bigness of the world to the left and the right. Does that still manifest similarly in standing, or is standing a little bit different? And then shifting your orientation from the internal to your orientation to other people in the room. And if you look around, are the people on the left of you, do they seem more open and friendly, and the people on the right of you seem a little bit more cagey? Or is it the other way around, or is there no difference? So it's your relationship to them, and then start looking at their faces, looking at them and their left and rightness. And how do you look at somebody? Do your eyes go out and kind of grab them, or do you let their image come towards you? We're bringing in some of those ideas from last week because they're good ideas. We don't want to lose them. We want to bring them in. What do their shoulders look like, left and right? Does one arm look longer than the other? Is one set of knuckles going to graze on the ground more than the other? Some of you do look like that, actually. I'm laughing with you, not at you, sorry. Sometimes you can see it, sometimes not. It's not true for everybody, right? Again, remember, the Feldenkrais teacher stays humble because we don't know what's going on in your black box. It's your black box, not my black box. Good, and then turning around a bit more and starting to shift your weight so that you can walk. Do you turn more to the right, to the left? Do you step off with your right leg or your left leg? Do you care? And that's a pretty long ATM. So well done, you guys. Yay. Like if you thought you had the attention spans of goldfish, I'm here to tell you no, you're bloody awesome. Have a break for 20 minutes. Have a well-deserved break. See if you drink out the right corner of your mouth or the left corner of your mouth. You've got such a symmetrical smile, Linda. It's very beautiful.